was thinking, oh, okay, I believe in magic. I'll just wake up and I'll be a girl and it'll be fine. But it didn't happen,
Yeah.
obviously. Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just something I had to try and be someone else. And I think that was the really thing that was very frustrating. So you're this. And I'm like, but I can't be that.
Yeah.
And then I really started to hate myself. And then, obviously you go through puberty and all that, and it's horrible. I ended up homeless. I didn't have any money.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Great in You podcast. My name's Stephen Panther. This is episode number 6. I'm really pleased today to have a fantastic and really interesting guest that's come along to talk to us. And she's called Lauren. And we'll meet Lauren in a sec. I'd like to just introduce you to a little bit about Lauren, really. She's a racing car driver, speed skater, and social worker as well, that's had a really interesting background and really interesting life. And the whole idea behind the podcast, as you should know by now, or if this is your first episode, is about people that have experienced really challenging situations in their life. And on the back of that, they've come out of it and they now help others in either similar situations or situations where they might need support. So good afternoon, Lauren,
Hi,
and
Steve.
welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to the podcast. How are you feeling?
I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm otherwise okay. I think I'm controlling it. It's fine.
No, that's fine. And I was the same when I did my first podcast. It's not easy, but hopefully, it'll be a nice, relaxing conversation.
Yeah.
So what I always try and do is within the podcast is we always talk about a little bit about our guest's kind of background, because the reason we do that is we want to get a bit of an insight really into, who you are as a person, what your childhood was like, where you grew up, what your family was like, that type of thing. So I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about, first of all, where you grew up and what that was like, what your families were like, what your friends were like, school, that type of thing. And it's a really good kind of foundation really for then what we're gonna talk about after that.
Okay, yeah. I come from a place called Orpington, which is in Greater London, southeast, near Bromley, Catford, Lewisham, around there. I'm the oldest of 3, so I had 2 younger sisters, and I grew up with mum and dad. I think my childhood was, I guess we'll get into it a bit more, but it wasn't a happy time for me.
Yeah.
I found it very difficult. And I didn't really like school, if I'm honest. I particularly didn't like it. I was so glad to leave. So I think my childhood, when I look back on it, is something that I can't really look on with much fondness in many ways. So it was difficult.
Did you grow up with siblings?
Yes, so 2 younger sisters, and one of them, she was 2 years younger, and I had one that was 4 years younger than me. Yeah, and we grew up in sort of semi sort of 3-bed semi in Greater London, in quite a nice area, I have to say.
Kind of a middle class upbringing, kind of.
Dare I say it? My dad was a journalist,
Okay.
so I think you could say that. But I think my parents certainly come from both grew up in council houses, and we're not particularly well off. So I think my dad worked hard and got himself to where he was in his career.
Real. So school then wasn't a fun time either?
No, not at all.
See, I'm from an education background, as you know. We worked together in Warrington, in the MASH team many moons ago. Well, it wasn't that long ago, was it? But
6 years.
Obviously, I'm from education, so I always like to know a little bit about our guests' kind of schooling and what that was like. And you've already kind of touched on it, that wasn't the most fond time, of your life. What do you think from an education point of view? Did it go well in the end, or did you get the results that you wanted? Did you get friendships and
I think my time at primary school was difficult. I suppose I'll talk about, if I tell people that I'm trans and that kind of thing, because I think it's fundamentally important to what my experiences were.
Yeah.
So I was very unhappy as a child, and I got bullied a lot. So and I think the problem with it was that people would just pick up on things that I didn't even see, and I got in trouble for like the boys would beat me up and stuff, and then my parents would want me to stand up for myself, and it became a thing of every time I was, coming home crying, then I'll get told off for that. So I kind of felt like I just sort of shut down, really, I think, through my
Yeah.
early childhood. And that was for me difficult. And I think you have to remember this was the 1970s.
Yeah.
So it's not a time when we kind of like go, oh, okay, there's a trans girl there, it's not kind of, oh, then maybe that's the issue. Nobody asked me. And it was just a question of surviving, really, I think.
And
From
is
my
it fair to
perspective.
say that it was more of a taboo kind of, not
Yeah,
something that really people talked about openly, really?
I think it was something that's just not understood. And I still think there are issues around understanding now.
Yeah.
But back then it was, there was no knowledge, there was no understanding. Everyone would just think, oh, you're probably just gay then, but I'm not gay. It's not like that. So,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of sort of stuff that would be leveled at me then. And, you have to conform. It's very, I felt very like, I had to be careful what I did. And I had to, although I was living, I suppose, at that age, I was thinking, oh, okay, I believe in magic. I'll just wake up and I'll be a girl and it'll be fine. But it didn't happen, obviously, like that. And I think so when you're going through all of that process, you think that I figured that there was no point trying to communicate my feelings. It would just get me in more trouble. So I just didn't say anything.
Did you feel a little bit kind of marginalized and ostracized? Like, did you feel like you couldn't be your real self?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just something I had to try and be someone else. And I think that was the really thing that was very frustrating. And it just becomes, eventually that stuff like that becomes exhausting.
Yeah.
Thinking about it.
Who were did you have, can you think back at that time, did you have people that you felt understood you a little bit more, that were your support network?
Yeah, I had my little sister, I was very close to, and as she got older, that she was a better support. She became a better support. I wasn't particularly close to my other sister. We just didn't get on, I suppose. Should we just say siblings don't get on?
Yeah.
And I do think that potentially I was quite a needy child, not surprisingly, and I think that probably took away from her. So maybe there's a bit of angst from her in that respect. I don't know. But I did have, when I got to my teenage years, which were really difficult, I did have friends, and, I'd go around see my friends and we'd read Just 17 and do all that stuff. So I was a very social, I was always wanting to be I'm quite a sociable person, I think.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's, I think that's obviously what you've described. It must have been incredibly difficult. It's difficult, isn't it, to pull out the positives, I suppose, when you...
Yeah.
I'm very similar. I think back to my childhood and I struggle to pull out the positives. But I think they're there, aren't they, somewhere, and you can see them. It's just that the negatives I suppose they overarch everything, don't they, and over...
Yeah. I think that's very true, and the trouble is, of course, we always remember those negative experiences, don't we? Far more in a lot of ways. So yeah, I did have friends. Yeah, I'm sure I had a laugh at some points, and my friends were quite supportive of me, and I think that's just how I was. It's like when I did eventually tell people, nobody was surprised, but my friends, that's just who you are. You're always like that, and that's it. So, but I guess so. There is some acceptance in that, even though things perhaps weren't talked about.
How do you feel that affected your presentation? So how you presented to other people, how you behaved? Do you think it affected you negatively, or do you think?
I think that in terms of my presentation, I was worried that if I present, if I let my guard down, that people would pull up on things. They would say, you're so girl, you're acting like a girl. Why are you doing that, and stuff like that. And I would get these things leveled at me, or get called things like a perf or stuff like that. It's the 80s, right? If you go to my sort of teenage years, so I think I was quite aware of my presentation, but for some reason, I suppose in some ways I was lucky that people were quite protective of me. Maybe I just exuded that I needed protecting, really, from the bullying and stuff, other people. But yeah, my presentation was not... It was something that I was acutely aware of, so all the time.
So really mindful of what you said and who you said it to, how you said it.
Yeah, exactly.
That must have been really challenging.
It's hard work, isn't it?
It's like being, it's trying to keep something up, aren't you, and act in a certain way that He's not the real you.
Yeah, try and that's it. Try and maybe portray like a macho image or something like that, or something where, like when I was at school, I had a fight with a lad when I was 13 because I was so fed up with the bullying, and I knocked this lad out in the end somehow.
Yeah.
That was the sort of first and last fight I had and won really. But
Yeah.
and I think the thing is it was just because I didn't know what else to do, and that there was so much pressure to do that because I was just fed up with constantly being picked on, and my parents would literally push me out of the house and say, "You're gonna have to you need to fight them," and it's all the time, and it was just crazy, really.
Yeah, no, it must have been really challenging.
Mm.
So, your relationship with your parents then,
Okay.
what how would you describe that relationship? So, talk about your mum first, and then maybe your dad, and
I think I'm very close to my mum.
Yeah.
She's one of my dearest friends, and I think my relationship with my mum was very much about was good, but my relationship with my dad wasn't. And I think the problem is that my mum didn't stand up to my dad, and it was only years later that I found out she was scared of him as I was.
yeah,
And so in some ways, I got very upset with my mum as well for letting my dad do the things he did.
yeah.
And that wasn't okay, and she feels really bad about that. I know that, but she didn't feel able to stand up to him, so I felt let down by her at
So she was
times.
essentially a victim
Yes.
of your dad's behaviour anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've seen pictures of your mum on, I've never met your mum, but I've seen pictures of
Yeah.
her online and stuff, and, you look incredibly close, which is fantastic, isn't it? How you'd want to be, with your mum. So tell me about the more difficult bit then. So your dad, what was that
Well, my
like?
dad was a journalist. He was away a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, he wanted me to be a lot of things I wasn't really.
Yeah.
And so I think
Like
there
your
was
kind of textbook kind of boy, and
yeah,
son
play football,
and
beat half,
yeah,
beat people up. I don't know.
yeah,
And have loads of girlfriends and stuff like that. And I think so for my dad, I was kind of like quite quickly became a disappointment to him.
yeah.
And then really just an embarrassment, really. And I think that he would.
Did you acutely feel that? Did you feel
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
I felt like he was almost ashamed of me, and I certainly felt later he was ashamed. He made me. It was his fault, really. To some things like saying that you need to go to a boys' school and doing that, which really didn't go well. And then later, when he wanted me to I did plumbing, which was really a disaster. And I think that he kept, but this will sort you out, and you need to. My mum would say you need
trying to fix
man
something.
up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was a thing of that, and stop being a puff, and stuff like it would call me things like that. It's really bad. So I think I got to a point with it where I wanted my dad to love me, and I never felt he loved me. And I think that I wanted. He used to smack me quite hard, and I would be terrified of him. You see, so
Yeah.
I think I say respect is earned, and he didn't earn it. So he hit me one time, and then I never respected him after that, and he would just make me cry. He was just horrible in so many ways, and I think I didn't know that he had a hard childhood himself. So
Yeah.
I think that, but it's not my fault.
No.
And he blamed himself for it. He goes, "Oh, it's my fault. You're like that. I shouldn't be away. He left you with your mum and your sisters." But of course, it's nothing to do. It's not about him.
And I mean, we know that. I mean, I've worked with lots of young people, on the trans journey and on the gender journey, and I think for lots of parents, it is a real challenge and a real difficulty. Even now, 20, 30 years later, we know much more than we've ever known about the area and about young people and about that journey. But I think some parents still struggle with that. But it seems that, back then, I mean, it's even, you've got your traditional kind of father figure in that sense that, just, did you feel that he wanted to listen to you and wanted to know about what was going on in your head and, your feelings about things?
I think for my dad, I think his way of his way of managing stress and anxiety was to not talk about it.
Yeah.
So really, I had a dad who just didn't want to talk about it. He would, to give you an example, he would phone me and he would say something like, "How's everything all right?" Which is a leading question,
Of course, yeah.
of course. And And if I said to him, actually, at one time I said, no, it's not all right, actually. He said, well, there's always someone worse off than you. And I'm thinking, how does that help?
Yeah, it's just not acknowledging you, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he didn't want to get into it. And I think that's the problem, and I think he was very much living in his world of celebrities, and he was a golf journalist and all these living the high life,
Yeah.
the plastic life, as my mum used to call it. And I think for my dad, that when he came back to the realities of home life, he would just go off to the pub,
Yeah.
and
That was his way.
he didn't deal with it.
Thinking about your professional role now as a social worker, you've got a real insight, haven't you, into people and situations and how they react to difficulties and things that they're struggling with. Do you think that your dad, that was his kind of way of, it was almost kind of shutting down, wasn't he? And not really absorbing what was going on and understanding you for who you were. And it was maybe because of the pressures of his other world, if you like, his journalistic world, or what was it? That's just me kind of guessing. Really, I haven't lived your life.
I mean, I think his problem was that he would have been traumatized as a child with what happened to him, what he experienced. His dad died at a young age. I think his mother, my nan, had a number of partners, and he had older sisters. There was domestic abuse going on between them, and I think all these things he saw as a bit of a latchkey kid. And I think for my dad, it was really, I think his way of he was obviously traumatized himself, and I think that had impacted him. So he just couldn't deal with it.
Yeah.
And he clearly was one of those things he took to the grave. He never dealt with his own trauma. No. So how's he going to deal with me?
Well, was there a point, without wanting to fast forward too much?
Mm-hmm.
How old was your dad when how old were you, when your dad died?
I was, let me think, it was 2001. I was 30. It was January 2001. So yeah, I would have been 29.
Did you ever feel like you got to a place where there was more understanding before he passed away, or? No.
No, I just excommunicated my dad some 6 months prior, and then he died. So
right.
No. Okay, I literally realised that was he said some horrible things, and I couldn't forgive him for that, and I realised that I wanted my dad to be this wonderful dad like some of my friends had.
Yeah.
But when I went through some therapy in the late 90s, it took me 3 months of counselling to realise I didn't have a relationship with him. Yeah. So it was just what I wanted it to be, but it never was.
And it wasn't reciprocal. It was you weren't getting what you needed from that relationship. I completely understand that as well, because I did the same with my mum. I tried for a number of years, and just it was me doing all the trying, me pushing forward, me trying to make that relationship work. And I think eventually you just go, well, actually, I've done what I can do, and you've sometimes got to accept that happens. And sadly, it's your parent. You think most people think that should never happen, but it does, sadly. And it's weird. It's interesting you said there about like your friends and stuff. And I think when you grow up with parents that's you're not quite getting what you need, or you're not quite, similar to myself, you do look to other people, don't you? And you look at their lives and you look at their relationships, and I do this. I almost kind of avoid conversations when they're talking about family and stuff, and because I don't know what that normal family looks like. Exactly. I know a little bit more now. I'm a bit older, but I always used to be like, oh, I'm not getting involved in that conversation because I don't feel like I've got anything to say. I don't feel like and I would look like what you said. I would look at other people in their situations and be like, almost wish that you had that in a way. So it's tough, isn't it, growing up in that?
Yeah, it is.
So thanks very much for that. And I know that that's not an easy thing to talk about, like your parents but what's amazing is, from a positive point of view, you got a fantastic relationship with your mum.
I have, yeah.
And
yeah, she's fab.
She sounds like she's, really supportive of you, and really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So school wasn't great.
No.
Some problems with upbringing, with your dad, and all that situation. Feeling just really frustrated and not being able to be yourself, and so let's go into your early kind of adult life, if you like. Then, so kind of from 18 onwards, what was that like? What were you were you starting to gather any momentum from a confidence point of view, and who you wanted to be, or was that a real struggle for But for a
I
few
think
years
it
after
carried
that.
on because I think I was, I think by the time I was 15, I realised, that I was trans, or we used to call it transsexual back then.
Yeah.
I think it was the term we used, and I'd found it in a dictionary, and I realised who I was, but I realised this is the definition of it.
Yeah.
But I was like, but I can't. How do I get there? I can't do it, And I just
Yeah.
felt it was just impossible, because it's like a huge mountain to climb, and I just didn't know what to do. So I just became very depressed, really. So
Yeah.
I think sort of through those times, I know that my mum would worry about me quite a lot, and I was quite reckless, and I was a reckless teenager anyway. And I had my food supervisor at school and stuff like that because, I didn't care about myself. I hated myself. So I just went through a period of continuing self-loathing. I would drive really fast, and I suppose I
Still like doing that now.
in the right place,
Yes.
yeah. But I do care about myself now,
Yeah.
so but I would take stupid risks,
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what typifies that. And then I was trying to find a way to really sort myself out. It became really, I suppose that went on until I was about 20, and then I was really thinking I have to do something, and it just became a. So I went off to. Where do I begin? Really, I'll tell that. Shall I just go into the talk about
Yeah.
how it?
Just before you kind of move
Yeah.
on, but you said before there around you kind of figured out what you were, almost like, looking at a dictionary, how you would categorize yourself,
I realised it was a
how
thing.
did you,
Yeah.
what was the process around that, and how did you actually then finally think? Because I imagine, because I've never experienced it, so I'm not going to try and surmise or guess, but I imagine there's a period of time where you're trying to figure out where you fit and what of those, if excuse my thing, but what one of those categories, if you like, you fit in that. When was that realization that was what it was? Was there a period of confusion and but then it seems like you almost come to that point of certainty where you were like,
I think
this is what...
no, I think a bit like, people say to me like, "Oh, you've changed gender." I said, "No, I always knew what I was in my head."
Yeah.
But I just thought, "Oh, I just have to live like this somehow." And then, of course, I was struggling to do that, and I realised, oh, actually, I'm not the only person in the world like this. And I think that's kind of how it felt until that point. Probably when I was about 15, and I got these dictionaries out, and I found this term around transsexuals, transsexualism, and I just thought, oh, that's gonna, God, is that where I'm at? And then I think it took me still years beyond that until I met somebody else who was the same as me, and then I was like, oh my God. So I think there's that kind of that's what I had to do to get there, really.
And the reason I'm asking that is that you still get people now that do not understand the process that you've been through, either physically or mentally. They do not understand it, and some people don't want to understand it. But for the people that do want to understand it, and I think there'll be people experiencing similar feelings, the reason why we do this podcast is so that others can maybe learn from people that have experienced things and maybe get something from it. It might be a family member. But it seems that some people really find that difficult to understand how you would feel when you're, 5, 6, 7, to how you feel when you're a teenager, to how you feel, it's that I suppose I'm trying to get to what that process felt like, and what that process was, and the thought processes that you were going through, and then how you kind of, came to that kind of, conclusion, if you like.
I suppose, okay, I'll try my best. I think
It's a big question, I know, and it's,
isn't it? I
but
mean,
who better to ask it? You might not be able to answer it fully, you might, but you've got your experience of that, haven't you? And I think that's important.
I mean, I did a deep delve into my childhood with my mum, really, and I think that I thought, like, for example, when I was about 6 and I was at primary school, I remember playing with the girls, doing all that stuff, and just thinking that's fine. But then I was thinking, oh, am I different from them? And the boys were kind of like, well, why are you doing that? And then we played like kiss chase, and I kissed the boys, which I didn't really think about.
Yeah.
But other people did, and that didn't really go well for me. And I thought, and then of course I'm thinking, oh, yeah, but you shouldn't be doing that. You're a boy, and I'm like, what? So I kind of go, oh. And it's all of that when you just think, I don't fit, you know, and why these boys keep pulling? Well, why you run? You run like a girl. You do, and I'm like, well, what does a girl run like? You know.
Yeah.
So I got all these kind of things that were just sort of thrown at me. It was like,
So like these kind of comments from lots of
yeah,
different
it was like
people.
It's like actually I didn't. I thought I was, when you're young, you think everyone's the same as you. It's like egocentrism, right? When you're age 5.
Yeah.
And, but what became apparent was that nobody was like me. So, you know, and basically everybody else would be pointing that out to me. And I'll be like, what am I doing? Have I got like this flashing light above my head saying, you know, weirdo or something? I don't know.
What age are you when you're trying to process this?
5 or 6.
Yeah, which is like crazy, isn't it?
And so I
That you're having
suppose
to do
like
that.
I learned to try to act more like a boy or try and be more like that so I get less grief from people. Or, you know, when your nan calls you a Nancy boy when you're age like 10, what's that about? Where's your handbag? Well,
Yeah.
where is that? And I was mortified, of course. And I think, well, what is it?
Yeah.
But you know, it's one of the, it's like that. It's like I just cannot. There's no way I could be a boy. I couldn't be a man. I couldn't do that. And I think the thing is that I tried really hard, but you know, now nobody ever says to me, "Oh, God, you're a bit like a boy," or "You're like that." Nobody ever says that. Why is that?
Yeah.
And it's just I don't have to think about it really. I think that's the thing. So it's trying to does that
Yeah.
do
No,
a job of
it makes
trying
sense.
to
Yeah.
my thought process. But then, of
Yeah.
course, everybody's telling me, no, you're this. And I'm like, but I can't be that.
Yeah.
And then I really started to hate myself. And then, you know, obviously you go through puberty and all that, and it's horrible. And it just makes you hate yourself a load more.
It sounds like there's more control now with your situation. There's more, you know, you're confident of who you are.
Yeah.
It sounded like, but you know, then it was
I know.
everything was just out of control, but not necessarily in a chaotic way. I know you took risks and things like that, but what was going on in your head and your feelings and your thoughts, it just seemed like that was completely out of your control. Is that fair to say?
I think it is. You know, I mean, I didn't have my choice about. My dad was like, "Oh, well, you need to go to this school, and you know that will sort you out." And you know, I had no control, so I was just terrified of what was going to happen next, really.
Yeah.
And I think the only things I had control in is when I was with my friends, and I would go around my friends, and we would just chat and do things that teenagers do, really. You know,
Yeah. Just be normal. Fit in.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I bet what I did was I built my friendship group around me. And I think what's really funny about it is that my dad sent me to a boys' school, so I knew the boys, but I was really friendly with the girls, and I seemed to have a lot of girlfriends. So the boys liked me to get in touch with the girls, so I kind of became the central point of the group, really, because of
Conduit,
that.
is that the right word?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. I had the connections, but
But that filled your purpose as well, didn't it? Because you started to, you know, to fit in with, you know, with those friendship groups.
absolutely.
Oh, thanks for that. I wanted to give people a bit of an insight from you, you know, what that was like and what you thought at the time and your thought process. And, you know, I'm no psychologist, you know, I'm not, you know, and you've probably had this, you know, with your therapy and things like that. But I just think it's interesting for the viewers to listen to and get your perspective on that, because I think that a lot people make a lot of assumptions, you know, in this area, and I think people think that they know about it and have an opinion without it being perhaps maybe informed or, you know. So I just wanted to give people that bit of an insight. So obviously now you're 19, 20, you're going out, you're going to the bars, you're going to the
clubbing and
clubs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What did Lauren look like then? What
What did I look like?
what music were you into? What were
I found this, well, actually, I found the Smiths age when I was about 16, 17. It was just about the time they departed, about 1987 it was. I was like a closet Smiths fan. Like I couldn't come out of the closet because everybody seemed to hate it. But when I first heard the Smiths, I thought, I'm not alone.
so that why did that resonate with you? And why were the Smiths why did you love them?
I loved them because hearing Morrissey's words, you know, it just made me feel like I wasn't alone. Because people would always say to me when I was like when I was a teenager, they would say, "Why can't you just be happy? You know, why are you so miserable all the time?" And I think, you know, people said, "Oh, the Smiths, they're miserable," but actually, those words, I used to hang on every word, and it meant so much to me. It just made me feel like I wasn't alone, and I felt so alone, you know.
Favorite song?
Possibly, "There Is a Light That Never Goes Out."
Yeah. like that.
But to try and get me to pin down a favourite Smith song would be a tall order. There's a few others in there.
Yeah. No, I know you're into your music. But no, I can see that. And what's really nice is at the time is that gave you that kind of comfort and maybe a bit of confidence, a bit more confidence. And
maybe, maybe. I mean, I think at the time I was going clubbing, I was getting drunk. I went to the raves.
Was that Manchester or London?
London.
Or London still, yeah.
Yeah, that was in London, and I went to the elite, all those raves, not the legal ones either. But I didn't. I was a driver, you see. So
the driver.
So I didn't do the drugs, and I ended up driving a DJ round, and I was quite good at not getting stopped.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Bro. So what? So from a kind of group point of view, your friendships and where you were going out and the scene that you were involved in, were you starting to kind of not expose but kind of meet people that were more similar to you and felt like you and thought, or did you still feel like you kind of stood out and you weren't necessarily part of those groups?
I was still at that time. I was still age 20. I wanted to find out, and I remember I had this contact for somebody, and I know this sounds crazy to think about it now, but when I contacted that person called Dave, he was obviously very gay, and I'd never met anyone who was gay before, and it scared the life out of me, which seems crazy to say now.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go to, there was this club, a place I could go to that had this night where people who were trans went, this is back in the 90s. This is 1993. I was like 20, no, 91 it would have been.
So for our viewers and listeners, then that's unusual at the time.
It's very underground. Yeah, it's very. Most people wouldn't know much. If you're in the gay scene, you might know. You'd probably know about it, and you were doing that.
Yeah.
So, but I was a bit scared when I spoke to this what turned out to be a lovely man called Dave, and so I put it off and thought I can't. And then literally I thought I've got to sort this out. I'm just really getting so depressed. So I contacted Dave again, and then by that point I was just 22, I think, 1993, and I went to this place, and I really went to this place, and it was a bit of an eye-opening place. It was a wonderful venue called Ted's Place, which is still going in Earls Court. Look it up. And they have a night on a Thursday night. They have people who are trans, and I went there. Oh my God, it was an eye opener. But the most important thing was I met somebody else there who's trans, who was like me, and they spotted that in me immediately, and I was able to talk to them. And then it was like a massive conversation that, and the most important thing is I felt like I wasn't the only person that's how I was, and from there I guess I was able to meet other people. It was a dangerous thing though, Steve, because I was like 22. I was. At that point, I was about to become homeless, and I was really struggling. I was still working at the time, but barely, just about. And there were guys there, that there were men that I got exploited and stuff. It was a strange place, and I think the problem is that I think that led into me then realizing that it's do or die. Really, I've got no choice here.
Yeah, and they exposed your vulnerability in that sense, where
I ended up homeless. I didn't have any money. I didn't really have any experience with men, so that was another thing that they was exploiting. And I suppose it felt like it was gender affirming, that all that stuff. But that there was a price to pay.
I'm thinking back now. What did you learn about yourself, or what were you learning at the time? What was the lesson?
I think it was just I was exploring who I was. I was trying to get some kind of plan together about what I could do and how I could sort these things out, because it felt impossible. But obviously, I met people who had, so that gave me some hope, I suppose.
So you didn't have a career at that time. You didn't have any.
No, I was doing plumbing. I hated it. It was a very dangerous place to be. The guys at work because I wasn't like them, had given me a really good kicking.
Yeah,
like badly assaulted me. And that was really the last time I did that job.
Yeah,
it was horrible.
So you went through the pain of that incident, but actually, in some ways, was that a kind of change in direction?
A catalyst, maybe.
Catalyst,
I took an overdose and I ended up in hospital. And then
after that incident,
and then that was 1995. I'd have been 23 by that point, and I was homeless, and I got a social worker. That's what happened. They gave me a letter to take to social services, and I got discharged. Yeah.
So tell me about that social worker then.
Okay, Sandra or Sandy, she likes to be called.
You still in contact?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I jumped ahead then, but go on.
I know, 28 years later.
Wow.
So I met Sandy, and she was on duty that day, and I told her that I was trans, and that, you know, I've got to sort this out. And so she had to find me somewhere to live. So she put me in this B&B, which was miles away from where I lived. And it was a really difficult time for me. I was still very depressed, and my mental health was not in a good place. So I was pretty broken, really. I would say I was on my knees. And
Is that your lowest point, do you think?
Yeah, nearly. Yeah, nearly.
All right.
It does get worse, but I think, and I went to my GP. My GP had told I was trans, and he had given me antidepressants, and that's what I overdosed on, ironically. So they gave me a different GP, and this GP had trained at Charing Cross at the gender identity clinic there. Her name was Hilary, and she was amazing. So I didn't have to explain anything to her because she already understood it all, and that was brilliant, really.
Yeah.
So from there, we started writing letters to my GP said there's no funding to go to Charing Cross, which is basically, in London, you've got 28 boroughs. I lived in one, and the hospital I wanted to go to was in another one. So I think it comes under Fulham. And it just ended up in a scenario where there was no funding. So I said, well, what can I do? And my GP said, you could write. And my social worker said, we'll write to the head of the health authority. So we started bombarding him with letters, right? Which went on for some time. And it took a year of letters before, as a retirement gift, he said one person a year could go. He would fund it. And there were 6 other people waiting. I got the funding because of that. I mean, it kind of makes it sound a bit easy. Within that space of a year, I got a flat, which was great. My social worker helped me get a flat. I went into therapy. It wasn't really that useful, but I liked my social worker. She was really good. My sister died in the middle of it, unexpectedly, aged just before her 19th birthday. My best friend.
Is that the younger sister who you had a great relationship?
Yeah, she was the first person I told. And I just think that that was my lowest point, because I then felt like I had to deal with that. And then I felt like the only person I had really was my social worker. My mum was consumed with grief, which is not unexpected.
Yeah.
My other sister nobody wanted to hear about my stuff. So I got told off for that, it's just like, but I've still got to deal with it as well.
Yeah.
So it was the worst time of my life, really, that. And I was not in a great place, really. So I think that sort of going through all of that was really horrible. But I did then I got the funding after that. So that was a ray of sunshine. Then I got back to college. I went to college at the time because my aim was to get to uni. So it's a bit I missed out. My social worker said, you're cleverer than you think you are. You can do something, Lauren. And actually, she likes psychology. So we talked a lot about it. So I went to college. And in that time when I got my flat, I did the college. And then my sister died. I didn't do the college. I got drunk for 4 months. Then I stopped drinking and started to focus, got into university, which I got into a uni that was near the hospital. So all planned, But I was still waiting for that hospital appointment. And that took till 96. So
tell me about what that. I want to track back for a couple of things.
Sure.
There. So, because that's quite a lot of information now, isn't it? But amazing, like what a challenging time, but what an amazing time at the same time. And your emotions must have just been all over the place.
Yeah.
Tell me about your social worker then, and what because I think it's important because you're now a social worker, so there must have been a bit of inspiration there. So tell me about that relationship and why she inspired you so much at a time where you really needed somebody, it sounds like.
I think it was that the problem is that everybody around me, although they understood what I was saying, who I was, and nobody was going like, oh, well, we don't believe you. They were just like, oh, okay. It wasn't surprising anybody. But the problem was, is as soon as I said, well, okay, but I've got to do something about this. And so a lot's going to change for me. That's what they didn't, because it meant they had to think about how they might have to change with me, how they might have to change their perspective of who I am. As soon as somebody feels that's put on them, then it's a problem. Do you see? Does that make sense? It's just like, oh, well, it's fine, but don't do anything about it because I don't want it to. But what will people think? Oh my God.
Yeah.
What about so and so down the road? What about the neighbours? Right. So it was that kind of thing. But my social worker, Sandy, that wasn't her thinking. Her thinking was about. She said to me, Lauren, write me a diary so I can understand how you're feeling. And I wrote this diary, which was very, very dark. When I read it back years later, I did destroy it. But she used that diary, as I would have done, as a social worker, to probably quote me and send to the director of the health authority. Well, look, this is how this young woman's feeling. This is what's going on here. Please, this is really urgent. So I think she believed in me. And I think that's what nobody else did. And I think even, when I look at my family and that, they thought me going to university was ridiculous. I wasn't clever enough to do that. You're not very clever, you can't do things. Because I was always put down. And I think as a child, as a teenager, my dad was telling me I was useless, I was thick. And that was really, really terrible emotional abuse, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
But that's what he did. But I think Sandra was like, actually, you're a bit cleverer than you think you are. And you could do this.
Yeah.
So, here's the perspective for the college. Why don't you do that? You look at uni. Let's start planning your life a bit, Lauren.
Yeah.
And actually, that was what was really, important about it. So I think that I loved her for that, because we would talk and we would joke about the future. Do you want to get married? And yes, I am married. So I've done all of that. Achievement unlocked, isn't it? But I think... What would it look like? How would your life look like? What do you think you'll be doing? And
she was trying to get you to visualize, wasn't she? And manifest it in a way, a more positive life and a more.
Yeah.
I mean, I know. I mean, I've worked with social workers for years and years, and they do get a bad rap, don't they? They get a terrible rap in the media. There's never anything positive about the amazing work that they do. It's only ever, like the negative stuff, and when things don't necessarily work out well. But it sounds like you had a brilliant social worker at the time, and a really forward-thinking social worker.
Yeah.
And that you're still in contact with.
I'm still in contact with her. And she's gave me these sort of motivational books to read, and I'll be like, oh, not another one.
Yeah.
But actually, like stuff like The Road Less Travelled and things like that, I remember.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think has touched something in her with regards to supporting you? Did she support everybody that way? Were you like somebody that just really inspired? She really wanted to.
I think she said to me, I suppose the best way to sum it up, really, she said to me, she said, Lauren, she said, you were so determined and you had so much grit. She said, I had to fight. Her words were something like, I had to fight tooth and nail to get you through because I could see how determined you were. I had to do it and I couldn't let you down. And we worked as a team, and the GP, who was absolutely brilliant. So we had I was so lucky, wasn't I, to have two really brilliant people who could see what was going on, believed in me, and were going to help me get there. And because of that, I felt like I was part of something that I could then move it forward. And we did, and she got me that funding. And
so that started to build your confidence and for people to be in your corner for a change. It's difficult for your mum, but your dad was never in your corner. Your family, siblings, people that people that maybe you thought were friends were not in your corner, but then you get these 2 or 3 professionals that are just like... You can see why that's inspirational, can't you? And just so tell me about obviously the funding aspect and what that day was like for you. Where were you? What happened when you got the news? How did you feel? Because that's really significant, isn't it? That's something that there's probably not a more important day in your life apart from the actual, physical side of things, But that day when you got that news, how did you feel?
My sister died in November 95, 18th November 95. And I got that news, I think it was around, I'm sure it was around around January, February 96. And I was really still massively in grief for my sister then. It's only a couple of months later. And I had an appointment to see Sandy, and I went to see her at social services. You rode my boats back down there or got a bus, can't remember. And I just, and she said, well, I've got some news for you, because I was thinking, because I was getting really upset about this funding and saying, what can I do? You know, I just like, I want to go to uni. How's this timing going to work? I mean, geez, there's a lot to sort out. And she said, I've got some news for you, because she'd already told me there were 6 other people waiting for the funding. And I was really scared then, because I thought, oh my God, they're going to get it before me. But I'm fighting for it. So eventually she said, Lauren, we got the funding. There's funding for one person a year to go, and that person's you.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God. So I was like, so that was great. I mean, I know it was another 6 months till I got an appointment, but I knew that was happening. So I felt some relief about it. It was just, I was really happy and just relieved, really. I mean, that was the start of, I suppose, that journey is going to happen.
Yeah.
And, you know, but let's just say there's a lot of hurdles to overcome after that.
Because what people have got to try and understand is that what that journey is like, and I know you've touched on that, but how long you are actually waiting for that news, that you know, because you've got so many barriers, haven't you? And you figure out how long, because you didn't maybe always want that, because you were trying to work out who you were, weren't you, and what.
Well,
what did that time frame look like between thinking, right, this is who I am, this is the journey that I'm going to need to start, and to actually getting that news that was going to happen?
It's about 2 years to 2.5 years. I think it was about.
Well, I thought it would have been a little bit longer than that.
Maybe
longer than.
It's one of those things, isn't it? I think I was about, by the time I got to that Ted's place to go and to talk to people, and I got that thing when I thought, okay, there's nothing. I think before that time, I would say that I knew what I needed to do, but I suppose having that conversation with someone else who was like me, that was the point where I thought, okay, it's game over. I've got to do this. I can't do nothing else. There's no other option. So I suppose I probably would have been about 22. So I'd say, maybe 3 years. It's kind of, by the time I got to Charing Cross, I was 25.
Yeah.
So that's how long that took. So.
And, you know, we don't necessarily need to talk about Charing Cross and the details and things like that. I mean, that's up to you. But it'd be interesting to know how you felt kind of from getting the news to that first appointment in 6. Was there a lot of anxiety and worry? And
I was absolutely terrified.
Yeah,
because to put yourself in front of a psychiatrist,
because it's massive, isn't it?
Yeah,
massive.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of talking about, happy to talk about this, the psychiatrist, but I mean, and kind of what happens there. But I mean, I think the thing is, I think people have this. There's a way for me. There's this misinformation that, oh yeah, you just go walk in there and then you go and have surgery and you do that. It's not like that.
No.
You know, you're incredibly. There's so much medical gatekeeping going on, unlike anywhere else. You know, somebody can say, "Oh, I'm gay." You know, they can just say that. But if you're trans, it takes you have to wait 3 years to get a diagnosis. You know, and see 2 psychiatrists to do that. So it's pretty intense.
Yeah,
and. You know that they will. That the way things are is that you would go there and that they would be, in fact, quite hard on you. Like really, like, no, you're not this, you're not that, and really just like they would just make you cry, basically.
Yeah,
I think that. Was
and did it feel like, you know? Obviously, we talked about the good news with regards to the funding and the appointment and stuff like that. Did you feel that was going to be swept from under you at any point during that process? Did you think?
Yeah, I mean, it was really scary because I don't think. I suppose there are other patient groups that get treated badly, but you know, I was told if I missed an appointment, or whether there was a bus strike, a train strike, whether my legs were broken or something like that, something befell me, I would have to be re-referred back again. They were like, you know,
so
it was
pressure, a lot
brutal.
of pressure. Yeah.
Brutal, yeah. And you think, but why? You know, geez, you know, because the problem is that I think what you have to remember is that when you're speaking to those psychiatrists, your life is in their hands, and it's like a horrible control feeling because they can at any moment say, okay, we're not treating you.
Well, do you know, we talked about, didn't we, at the beginning, that complete lack of control that you had. To being in control a little bit and then getting that taken back away from you, that must have been, you know, it must have constantly been kind of like that. But it was successful,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
and you went through that process, as
Yeah.
challenging as it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Again, I do like to ask this sometimes of our people that come on. What did you learn about yourself during that process?
Quite a lot, I suppose. I mean,
Yeah,
I think you have to remember that there's a process of transition, isn't there? And
yeah,
I think what I would say is that once I started on hormones and all that, that was 96, and but after about 8 months beyond that, that's when it was like the clouds cleared and I know it sounds a bit of a cliche, but the sun came out and suddenly it was like everything was way better and my grades went up 10%. I mean, it was just like I could just be myself, and that and I did that at uni, and I think that um, it was just the best thing ever. So I think that the feeling of that was just like this is what everyone else has already got, right?
yeah,
So I've waited 25 years to get to that. I mean, it's just such a waste. But yeah, I mean, I think what did I learn about myself? Sorry, Steve, I'd say is that I just felt that. I learned a lot about myself. I learned how that perhaps I was tougher than I thought I was. Um, I learned how to have thick skin. um, I learned to, and I suppose there's a lot of self-discovery going on with all of that. And actually, there's quite a lot to learn as well about gender etiquette and stuff like that. I don't really think about anymore, but there's definitely stuff that you don't realize. So I think it's a lot going on, isn't it? Really,
yeah.
a
It
lot to
sounds
learn.
really, really complex
It
and
is.
so much to think about. What type of thinker are you? Do you have a million things going on in your head at the same time, or are you quite structured with your thinking and you can park things and you can? Again, it's a big, massive question, but some people, some people will have that kind of really busy mind where there's just everything going on and it creates anxiety and you're anxious about one thing and then that's okay. And then another thing will start. And then, are you that type of thinker or do you
Um,
think, or maybe that's changed? I don't know as well over the years.
I think if you ask my husband, he would say that I've probably got undiagnosed ADHD. I think my
Right.
mind's just like
All
it's
over
a
the place.
nightmare. It's just everything's 100 miles an hour all the time,
Yeah.
and I'll think about one thing. I find it hard to keep my focus and on track. So, but I'm spinning plates
Yeah, but with
everywhere.
that comes pressure as well, doesn't it? And it
Yeah,
seems like, you would put a lot of pressure on yourself as well and be hard
yeah,
on
yeah.
yourself.
I was definitely very hard on myself,
Yeah.
and I'll beat myself up. And I think that comes from a life of doing it. I suppose
Yeah.
and it's really frustrating, isn't it? But I mean, I think through going through that process, back in the 90s, as I did, I think as sort of could just become myself, it did make my life a bit less complex,
Yeah.
a lot, in some ways. And I didn't really, some things I just didn't have to worry about anymore, which was a relief.
Yeah.
And I think, on getting through that process, it's just a relief really to get through it all. Really, that's what it is. Just a
And
relief.
what were things like at university? Because you were going through the process then, I
Yeah.
imagine. What was that like? How were you accepted by your peers? And was that challenging at some times? Or
Yeah.
you would have really positive moments, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was the making of me really, but I think, yeah, the first year was really hard, but I made some good friends, and some of those friends, in fact, one of those friends walked me down the aisle back in June. So yeah, I made some very important friends there, and I think that when I got to my second year and I think my first year was really difficult because imagine I was starting to transition, but I didn't have any hormones at that point. It was the anniversary of my sister's death.
Yeah.
Just a little bit to deal with and start university. So I had a bit of a complete
Yeah.
meltdown. Ended up, I still carried on, but they gave me a counsellor. I was doing a
Yeah.
psychology degree, so that
Yeah.
helps. And that counsellor was really good, and she supported me through and kept me head above water, I think, and helped me deal with some things like learning like I didn't have a relationship with my dad. These realizations, I suppose, came through, but people were. It was okay. I mean, actually, I think back then people were like everybody asked me, so I just basically I targeted all the people that were at the top of the social tree, and they did all the explaining for me to everybody else. So that was quite a good shrewd move, I think.
How did you learn to do that?
I don't know if I didn't know if I necessarily planned it, but I just sort of
You
saw
just
them.
thought, yeah,
I knew it was, and I went for the it girls, the it boys, and just went and they said, "Oh yeah, she's all right, Lauren. Yeah, why don't you just?" I said, "Just talk to me. It's fine."
yeah,
So I sat there and did a million questions for 3 months with people, and then they were kind of like, and I always like took it on like that. If people like ask a stupid question or something that could be offensive, I didn't take it that way. I didn't go
no,
around for chipping my shoulder or anything. I never would
no,
do that. And there was another girl at uni going through the same thing, but she did, and it didn't really go well for her. So I got accepted into it. And the second year I was in the girls' halls. It was brilliant. It was like an education for me, and they loved it. So we had a great time, just
yeah.
doing all that kind of stuff. And
That just sounds really like positive as
it
well.
was
Like,
really
what was
exciting.
the university you went to?
I went to University of Surrey, Roehampton. It was called Roehampton Institute London back
It
then.
sounds posh. Was it posh?
No, I don't
No?
think so. I don't think it wasn't like a red brick. Well, it was
No.
one of the oldest colleges actually in the country, but I think the fourth oldest, but not
Yeah.
really a red brick.
But even the fact that in '96, you're talking, nearly 30 years ago, aren't you?
Yeah,
The fact that there was that trust and that, forward thinking progressiveness of the university to say for you
yeah,
to
yeah,
be in the girls' halls and,
yeah,
while you were transitioning, that must be, do you think back on that and think that was amazing? What an amazing experience for you,
yeah,
like,
totally. And I made some really good friends.
yeah,
And I had an amazing principal. And in my final year, in my final year, I was a college president, so elected position, and I looked after the welfare of the students, and
well,
much to the dismay of my lecturers who said, "Lauren, you're borderline first here, but you're doing this job. Are you crazy?" Because it was infamous for knocking your grades down.
yeah,
But it was something that was really important to me, and I wanted to help other people, like my social worker helped me, and I suppose I just started to really fly. And I think if it says anything, it just says, well, this is exactly where I should be, exactly what I
yeah,
should be doing, exactly who I am. And I'd never done, I think previously, when I was younger, things were terrible. Life was horrible, but now life was becoming brilliant, and
I
I was
suppose
starting to,
going back to some of the things that your dad used to say about you being
mm,
sick and you'd never do that and you never.
yeah,
When you started university, did you have that kind of imposter syndrome and think,
yeah, a
like
bit, yeah.
I can't do this. What am I doing here? And but then gradually that noise would hopefully start to kind of get quieter and quieter and quieter. And then you're building these fantastic relationships with people, and you're starting to achieve, and you're starting to, it must have been a really like exciting time
Yeah.
for you.
It was, and I think that in my first year, when I struggled in that first semester, my mum said to me something like, "Well, you're not that clever. You're not surprised you're struggling." And I was like, "Yeah, thanks, mum."
Yeah,
But then by the time I got to my third year, I was teaching second year students how to use statistics. After my first year, I rewrote the course booklet on how to do the stats by hand and shortened some of the tests for the lecturers to make it better for the students.
yeah,
So I was already, realizing people saying, "Actually, you're really good at this,"
yeah.
and I was like, "Am I really? I can't be good at anything,
You can
surely."
just sense from you talking as well, just that confidence just growing
Yeah.
and growing, and you think that, the lowest, you talked before about the lowest points that you
Hmm.
had, you're starting to go up now. If it's a graph,
Yeah.
you're up there, aren't you?
I'm just happier, aren't I, talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
it and
yeah,
looking back on those memories with such fondness. I mean, I think my time at uni was like I just started to fly, and
yeah.
in fact, at the end of my uni, my when I finished my degree, the college sent me to represent them to Canada for 2 months on sabbatical.
Wow,
Where weirdly I did a social work course, which was just pure coincidence, at University of Waterloo, Canada,
wow.
and that was incredible to be reckoned. They said, "We want to thank you for all the hard work you've done for the students," and it was
Yeah,
really
that's a
amazing.
real endorsement, isn't it, from a university? I think you should
Absolutely,
be really proud of
yeah,
that. Amazing. So you passed your degree,
I did.
did pretty well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I got 2-1.
Yeah. And
So
then, how did it come about? Obviously, you'd had this fantastic experience at university. How did it come about then, the whole kind of social work career then?
yeah,
What was what happened? What was the thinking? Because I suppose this kind of, this final bit of the podcast really is, using your experiences, using your, personal experiences, your friendships, your family members, what you had to go through, the amazing social worker that you met and the GP, what then was your thinking around, well, actually, I'd like to do that as a career? What kind of led to that?
I think I left university and I got a job in Nottingham, moved to Nottingham, and did this job around behavioural analysis software and eye tracking software, which I would train generally lecturers in universities how to use it, and I would set it up for them and I would sell it to them. So I did that for 3.5 years, and I finished going through all the Charing Cross thing in that time. But I think that I got to a point where it kind of wasn't really, I kept thinking, well, maybe that nagging thing about social work, maybe I should do. I really enjoyed all the welfare aspect of what I did at college. And I remember Sandy's comments about one day, she said, I think you'd be a good social worker, you. And then I met my now husband. I met him in 2001, and he lived in Macclesfield. He was a Maclad, not literally. And when I moved up, I thought, okay, I'm going to leave my job in Nottingham and move up. And I thought I'll apply to Salford to do an MA in social work. And I went to, so I moved up there. Went to the interview. They did me a phone interview and they said, we don't think you've got enough experience. We suggest you go and work in a children's home or something. And so I said, oh, so I was really disappointed by this. So I thought, So I phoned them back and I said, excuse me, can I just tell you a bit about my life experience, about what happened to me? So I told them and they said, okay, we'll give you an interview. So I had to do it again, but literally had to share. I said, yeah, I was a social worker because this happened. And also I did all this stuff at uni and that got me in. So I just felt like I had to, I felt like there was a need in me because my social worker, Sandy, saved my life. And I really don't think I would be here today if it wasn't for her.
Yeah.
And that's how important she is to me. One of the most important people ever in my life. And I think that if I get anywhere close to what she did, then I think that that I would die happy, because I think that's what it's worth doing. So I do it because I want to help people. And I have had an experience fairly recently where it's come full circle. I worked with a girl who was really depressed too, and I've since heard she's come back to me and said, I'm doing great now. I'm very, very happy. And, I'm not going missing. She's not being, exploited and all these things.
Yeah.
And she said, I just want to thank you. And, so I know that when she looks at it, so for her, it's like full circle, isn't it?
Yeah, so in years to come, she'll look back on you and that might inspire her.
well, I mean, it's not about how I feel, it's about what for her, isn't it? And like Sandy said to me, I said to her, you were such an inspiration. She says, no, Lauren, you were the inspiration.
Yeah.
So.
And that, you're kind of mirroring that as well, aren't you? By you're saying the same thing. It's not about me, it's about her.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I suppose, like, what is it about the job as well, son, that you absolutely love? I mean, you've been a social worker for how many years now?
17 this month.
What is it about being a social worker? Because as I said before, social workers do get a bad rap. And I've worked with some brilliant, I've worked in the same office as a group of social workers, being an education lead, in a MASH team. And I've worked with some brilliant social workers, and I used to have to work with schools and they'd be moaning all the time, oh, this social worker this, or this social worker that, just trying to get them to understand that, the pressures that you have in your job as a social worker, what that's like, thresholds, the complexity of your cases. So I suppose my question really, I know I've gone about this in a long way, is what do you love about the job, and what do you find really challenging and difficult about the job?
What I love about it is that I love it when I see someone come good, whether it's a parent, sorting their stuff out and really changing what they're doing, so their children are really benefiting from that. Or, if I'm working, like I just said, about a teenager I work with who's doing really well now, and she thinks that it's because of me. Well, she did it, not me.
Yeah.
But, I've had an impact. I love being able to do that, and sometimes using my experiences to think, well, okay, what can we do? How can we work this out? What do we need to, what's the problem here? What's stopping them making those changes? What aren't they seeing? So I whether it's, sometimes it might just be illustrating a child's perspective and how actually, if you put yourself in their shoes, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing because it's really hurting them.
Yeah.
And sometimes parents don't always realise that, especially, I don't know, domestic abuse. Yeah. They don't realise the impact it has on the child.
Yeah.
But I think,
I mean, what you've got there as well is you've got your own experience of that, haven't you? So
yeah,
what did that feel like for you as a child? And you're able to kind of,
yeah,
even if you don't verbalize it, that's kind of what you're doing, aren't you? You're using your own experience. You don't have to tell them that that's your own experience. I know I do that sometimes when it's the right time. I'll say, well, I experienced something like that,
yeah,
but you're actually using those skills, and you're able to really empathize, and you've been through it, haven't you? You've been in those relationships where that's happened to you as a young person or an adult. So that's what you're kind of projecting, isn't it, to the people that you work with, in a lot of ways.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what are the bad things about it? Well, I think sometimes that, you do get abused, and I have been, suffered abuse from parents. Sometimes I get a bit tired of that and just say,
Yeah.
well, it's not my job to be abused, and it isn't. I think
Yeah.
that what do I dislike about it is the paperwork, too much paperwork, too
Yeah.
much.
Not enough
the
in front
bureaucracy.
of
Yeah,
people
it
and-
just gets in the way of doing the real work, and writing
Yeah.
endless stuff that people don't read.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of that, and I think really there's that culture of just nobody goes on home on time. Everyone works 50 hours a week. It's just like, and if it's
Yeah.
people
Do you-
working weekends.
Do you think people's perception? The reason I'm talking about this is I'm hoping that people that watch this, they might not have ever met a social worker. They might have just heard about a social worker and what they did and how they, people assume, don't they, social workers could come in and take your children, but that's the very last step, isn't it? There's many steps before that on how social work teams try and support young people and try and support families and to keep that family group together. And so I suppose when I hear about social workers and what I hear people say about social workers when they don't really have that kind of background and that they're not making an informed decision, is they make a lot of assumptions, and I think they get a bad rap. And it's like they assume, that a social worker is a certain type of person or a certain. I don't really know what I'm getting at. I don't know what my question was, but
And I think you've got okay. I mean, I think I would say there were social workers that have had a lot of life experience, and I suppose I'm in that camp, aren't there?
yeah,
And there were some that aren't. So you get this, and like every job, you get people, good cops, bad cops. So I think people's perception, we're very much like trans people, I suppose, a much misrepresented group in the media. Yeah, the media love attacking trans people. They love attacking social workers, don't they?
You never see a good positive social
No.
work drama, do you? Like on TV,
Not
it's like you
many.
see lots of police stuff and detective stuff, but you never see anything that social workers are doing really.
There was a good one, that was on the BBC recently, but you're right. There's a lot of bad press, isn't there?
Yeah, and in that sense, I think what I'm getting at is it's kind of a bit of a thankless role at times, isn't it? Because you go into meetings and and the way that sometimes people, like you say, people might abuse you or have an opinion of you before they even know anything about you and how you work and what you do, and a little bit like the police in that sense. So how do you kind of battle with that stuff?
I think what I try and do is, I'm pretty straight talking. I'm pretty open and honest.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think genuine. So I think I just show them by doing my job well that's not like that.
Yeah.
I suppose I prove it in the proof is in the pudding, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
And
It's not what you say; it's what you do.
yeah, totally. And I think when I say to parents, look, I'm not here to catch you out. I want you to do well. The last thing I want to do is escalate this. The last thing I want to do is to get into a situation where your children can't live with you anymore.
Yeah.
But what I would always say is that you can please give me the evidence so we can make this better with you. Don't give me the evidence where it's going to go the other way, but you will give me the evidence either way. But
Yeah.
I think that's it. And I always say that I'll just be as fair as I can, and if I can go a little bit to help you a bit more to make that difference. But ultimately, I always say to parents, you have to do it yourself. I can't do it for you.
So it's about relationships, isn't
Yeah,
it? And good
building rapport.
communication,
Yeah.
consistency,
Totally.
all those kind of important words. Right, so we are literally coming into the last kind of 5-10 minutes now.
Okay.
So what I want to talk about is almost kind of wrapping things up and coming full circle is what I suppose what's next for you? What What do you want to do? And I know you do a lot of work in your day job to kind of inspire people, but what else would you want to do to teach people, to educate people? Because you've got such an interesting story, and you've got such an amazing experience. Really, I know that you've had so many difficult periods within that, but what is it that you'd like to do next?
Right. Well, I've got between a friend and myself, we decided that I worked with a trans child a couple of years ago, and what really I noticed is that they had when I tried to advocate for them with other professionals, I realised that there's still a lack of knowledge there, and a lot of misinformation. So. A friend of mine had been doing some training. I decided to train the social workers where I worked at the time in the police. I was working at a police station, and that went down quite well. So I trained in more social workers in that authority, probably about 100 in all. So I decided to set up my own company with my friend called Gender Genius, and we're going to look to what I want to do is educate people to support trans children and trans adults better, and also look at how staff are treated as well, because in my time I have come into some issues around that in that area.
Yeah.
Whereas I've been through things where obviously I've been like a square peg in a round hole back in the 90s when nobody knew what to do. So I think it's just trying to get that information and educate people to say, this is not a scary thing. We don't have to make a big deal about it. We can work with this. It's fine. That's.
So you feel like you're in a position now after 17 years of social work?
Yeah, 17 years social work.
So you're in a position now where you want to really use that kind of area of expertise, really, isn't it? Because
my lived experience for over half my life,
Yeah. What better experience? So you really want to kind of push that forward now and try fill that gap, really, because there still is a gap, isn't there? I've got another friend actually that does something similar in the same field, that is very, very busy doing that and delivering stuff, because I think people are really interested and people want to approach this in a better way. In my experience, there'll always have people that are not interested and are just a little bit ignorant. So I think it'll be a really positive thing for you, and I think it'll be a really positive project. And I think to get that lived experience, there's nothing better when you're delivering training. To get that lived experience, you're not reading it from a book. You're not, So, I wish you a lot of luck with that.
Thank you.
So I suppose my final question is, what would you say to people out there, maybe that have maybe gone through something similar? Maybe they've got a family member that's struggling, around kind of gender, and kind of what's, I suppose, what advice would you give, and where should they go to for support? What kind of emotional advice would you give to them? And then just anybody that's watching the show, really.
I think if it's a child, I think the thing is to listen to them. I think when I had a child come out to me through work, it's a massive thing to do, and obviously I've come out myself, prehistorically, so it's a massive thing to do, and it takes a lot, and what you got to remember is when somebody does that, they have thought about this this is not like, oh, I'm just going to say that. They thought about it, and they're really scared about how you're going to react. So I think the best thing to do is to be supportive and try and, help them to talk about their feelings, because they probably wanted to talk about these feelings for years, or like me, kept them bottled up for, very long time.
It's a bit like when anybody discloses anything to anybody, isn't it? It's you've almost been chosen, haven't you?
Yeah,
you disclose your training, it's like, try and give time to that young person. Try and show that you're interested. Try and show that you want to support. It's kind of, and that to some people might be like, it might be completely daunting. What would I say if in a situation where might be somebody that works in a school, for instance, and somebody, we talk all the time when we deliver training around, they pick you for a certain reason. It might be that you've smiled at them that day. It might be that you say good morning to them every morning. It doesn't matter what it is. They've chosen you to disclose that information to. And it's how we as kind of day-to-day people that are not used to that type of thing. We are, because we work in this area. We're used to, but for people that are not used to dealing with it, what would you say to them around kind of, I don't know, it's easy, isn't it, for us to say, just try and support them. But what kind of suppose what practical things could they?
I think what you should do is let them be the expert, and you can learn from them, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if you get things wrong, just say sorry, and people will understand that. It's not, don't get hung up on it.
Yeah.
I think that you should. I think what really helps people is meeting other people like them. Like I said about, I went to that crazy place, but I'm very grateful for that crazy place because it was amazing.
Is it Ted's?
Ted's place, yeah. But the thing is that that there wasn't stuff out there when I was young, but there is now, like stuff like, I don't know, the Proud Trust. I know Manchester support quite well, and I know the Proud Trust. I've
worked with the Proud Trust.
They're really good. And I think it's trying to just get them into groups to meet other people, so that because not feeling isolated is the worst thing. And I always say that I'm great when I'm supported, but I'm no good when I'm not.
Yeah.
And I think that still holds true today. I've got an amazing husband, I've got amazing friends, and without them I wouldn't be here. So I think it's when you've got a child who's feeling quite vulnerable and quite worried about how people are going to react to them, I think about feeling supported is absolutely key, isn't it, really?
Yeah, no, it is, and that's really good advice. What would you say to maybe parents and carers that are maybe trying to?
I would say to them, okay, your child, if you have a trans child, they're a bit special, okay, but they can have an amazing life. Because I think the thing that parents always do is they always go, oh my God, it's a nightmare. Nobody wants a trans child, do they? This is the thing.
Yeah.
So I think the problem is that every parent goes, oh no, they're never going to find it, settle down, they're not going to get married, they're not going to have children. You don't know these things. So it can be an amazing life. I've had an amazing life, and my life is so much better than it ever was before. So I think the thing is that, and I think the other thing parents worry about is if they're losing a son or gaining a daughter or vice versa. I think there's a grieving process that they go through. But what you've got to be careful to is not project that onto the child, because then they would just blame themselves.
Yeah.
Oh, because of who I am, I'm not good, and you get those things like I did, I'm not good enough.
I think you touched on it before, the enormity, I think, of young people coming out, whether it's sexuality or gender. I've experienced it working in secondary schools, and it is, I feel, and I'm not from that community. I'm not I'm not gay or bisexual or anything, but or on that gender journey, I'm not trans.
Sure.
But that connection that you have with a young person when they come to you for support and help and advice, and I just think they're so brave, and so to do that in front of 1,000 or 2,000 people, it's just now on social media, even when we were kids, it was none of that. I just think it's incredibly brave, and that's why I have a connection to people that have experienced that and that are going through that, because I think if you've ever supported somebody through that, I think you will naturally just have that connection, because you just think it's so brave and powerful, and they need our help more than anything.
Yeah, people don't choose to be. You are who you are, and you can't change that. And I know that because I've tried to change it and I can't.
Yeah.
So I mean, but and it's but on the other hand, it's made my life such a story, really, and something. It's just made it. It makes me who I am now, doesn't it? So I think and I'm okay with it. So
well, thanks for that, and that's that information. I think people will get quite a lot from that, to hear that from you. So last question,
okay.
and I've kind of touched on this before, but what have you throughout all this journey, what have you found out about yourself, and where you think back where you were, in your house, in I forgot what area it was again.
Orpington.
Think about yourself then and where you are now, and what type of person you are now, and that journey that you've been through. What have you found out about yourself, and what's the most important thing about that?
I think that one thing I always think about, and I've used this a lot of example in working with depressed teenagers, is saying, look, when I was 16, if you had told me what I've been now, I would have gone, what?
Yeah.
And I would not
say
believe
that as
you.
well.
And I just think, but it's incredible. So I think I'm just like, it's like light years away, isn't it? What's the thing I've learned myself? That I'm worthy, and that that I have value.
Yeah.
Which I think that I didn't think that when I was a teenager. I thought I was just useless and rubbish, and I hated myself. And now I don't hate myself, and I know I have value, and I know that you know, I always say now, if you're my friend, you're lucky.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, and it's that confidence of being myself and being who I am.
Yeah.
And I've lost all that shame that I was taught that was just basically like just ran down my
Yeah.
throat all the time growing up.
Yeah.
You know, how oh God, look at you, you're such a, you know, and you just feel shame, but I don't feel that anymore. And that's why I'm able to sit here and talk to you about it. And it will be viewed by a lot of people, I guess, right?
Yeah, and you get to that position in your life, don't you? And that where you just, I'm ready to talk about this now.
I'm okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
I've
good.
worked it through.
Yeah, I'm
Done
good.
the therapy.
Well, honestly, an absolute pleasure to talk to you and for you to share your journey with us, or part, you know, some of your journey. I'm sure there's so much more in between. I'd love to get you back on as well to talk about, you know, maybe, you know, with maybe other people as well, to talk about your experience and how we can support people, because ultimately that's what we try to do here.
Absolutely. If it helps people, that's why I'm here, isn't it? You know.
But thank you so much, and thank you for sharing that, and it's really inspirational, and you know, I feel, you know, proud to be having this conversation with you, for you to be sharing it with me. And just thanks very much, and you know, hope you come back again to see us. And,
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, that'd be cool.
so tell us finally then. So where, you know, do you have a website? Do you have anything?
I'm in the
is
process.
that in process?
It's in process.
I'm sure people will want to know a little bit more.
Yeah, it's called Gender Genius. We do training around issues of for trans people, so people can understand better and you can support them better. And we have got a website, but it's not quite live yet.
Yeah,
but we're just in the process of getting things moving.
Coming soon. So once it's all set up, then, you know, I'll obviously help, you know, share that, and you know, LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff. But thank you again. It's been a really, really interesting and inspirational story. I think you should be extremely proud of yourself.
Oh, thank you, Steve.
All right. So thanks for coming, and we'll see you again. Thanks everybody for listening to the Great in You podcast. We really appreciate your support. Please like, subscribe and share, and the podcast will be available on Spotify, YouTube and all other social media platforms. Thank you so much. See you next time.